Welcome to This Organized Life. If you're a mom, wife, or coffee lover seeking advice on how to reduce clutter and reclaim time, look no further than your host, Lori Palau, founder of Simply Be Organized and author of Hot Mess, a practical guide to getting organized. For a lot of people, clutter is their dirty little secret, but it doesn't have to be. Each week, we will share practical tips, chat with experts, and provide strategies on how to keep you organized. I hope that by sharing our stories, you feel a little less alone and more empowered to tackle the areas that are holding you back. So let's get started.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I'm your host, Lori Palau, and I am so happy that you are here joining me today. If this is your first time tuning into our show, welcome. In case you are interested in watching us, make sure that you head on over to YouTube and you can follow us over at Simply Be Organized. We have all of our episodes there as well as on your favorite podcast streaming platform. So make sure you follow us, subscribe, all of the things. We have lots of different guests with lots of different areas of expertise, and I am very excited to share today's guest with you. Joining me today, and I'm going to bring her out in a minute, is Melissa Leon. And Melissa is a business strategist, and what she does is help a lot of small businesses with financial health and organization for themselves. As a small business owner myself, I know that there's a lot of responsibility of wearing all the hats and knowing what to do and doing things right and connecting the dots, and it can be overwhelming. And for all of our small business listeners out there, this is going to be such useful information. I actually had Melissa come join us for a webinar for all of my SBO partners. For any of you know, I also coach and mentor professional organizers. And the feedback I got from our team, which I didn't even tell Melissa, was amazing. They absolutely just were loving the insight and content. So I said, why not share her with the rest of our podcast community? Because many of you are small business entrepreneurs. And so I also want to talk to her a little bit about the differences between running your finances from a personal perspective as different from your business perspective. She's also a mom, so she knows about just life organization and wearing all of those hats. And she's just fun. So I said, why not bring her out? Because sometimes people think that finances and just can be dry and boring and, not a fun part of organizing. And we want to change that narrative. So without further ado, let me welcome my friend, Melissa, out to the show. Welcome, Melissa.
Oh, hello. How are you?
I am well. And also I didn't mention Melissa also is a podcast host, and the name of her company is 2 Cents Consulting. So she's going to talk all about that, but I forgot to mention that in my intro and just want to let you know. So welcome, Melissa.
Well, thank you. Such a nice introduction. I so appreciate it. And I had such a blast talking to your SBO partners. It was so much fun.
Oh my gosh, it was great.
I'm such a nerd and I can talk accounting all day, but I love how you introduced me as fun, because so many people get so nervous that they're going to be like sent to the principal's office and it's some dry, boring conversation with accountants. And I try really hard to bring a little fun to it. So
well, you definitely do. So obviously I gave our listeners kind of like a very top line overview, but just in your own words, tell them a little bit about yourself, your story, and then we can dive into the nuts and bolts of everything.
Yeah, awesome. I really like to start when I was 16. My very first job was as a bank teller, and I didn't know what I was doing. I could barely count to 10, I think, but I somehow landed this interview and got the job. And I started dealing with other people's money at a very young age, before I really even understood the value of what I was doing. And I had that job as a bank teller and as a personal banker all the way through high school, all the way through college. It helped fund a lot of my college activities. And when I graduated from university, my undergrad, I thought I wanted to run a bar or a restaurant. Like I enjoyed being in them. So maybe I'll go run one, So I went to hotel restaurant management school. I had a blast. It was super fun. I got to take classes like the history of beer. I mean, who doesn't want to do that? It was so fun. And I got my very first job at a resort in Sedona, Arizona, which is like the coolest place in the world. If
not a bad place to get a first job for sure.
It's not a bad place. And I hated it. I loved Sedona and I loved the resort that I was in, but I didn't like the work in the restaurant. And then I tried to do housekeeping and I didn't like that. And I was in this like manager in training program and they said, why don't you try accounting? And I probably looked at this guy like he had 4 heads. And I was like, I am not trying accounting. Not my thing. No, thank you. And he said, well, I see you doing payroll for the room service department and you're good at it. Let me just have you try this for a week. And if you don't like it, we'll move you to the front desk and you can try that. I never left, Lori. I did 1 day in accounting and I fell in love with it. Super nerdy. I was doing payroll there. I was doing what's called daily revenue reports. So like hotels run 365 days a year. So they're looking at their P&L essentially every day. I was doing that and I fell in love with it. From there, I was recruited by a large luxury hotel company, a global company, and I was with them for 16 years. I did everything from payroll, AP, all the way up to leading a global program for their operations finance, redesigning and figuring out how processes could be done from a centralized location that had once been done at each individual property. So I started working from home for them in 2015. So long before it was cool or required to work from home, I was doing it. And I just really enjoyed process improvement. I enjoyed looking through the details, figuring out the puzzle and diving in. I left that company in 2020 and started 2 Cents Consulting. And I have a business partner. She lives in Hawaii. I'm in Arizona. And she and I have been working remote together for years and started helping small businesses all over the US. And it's been amazing. It's like probably doesn't even describe how good it feels. We've helped 35-ish companies at this point, small businesses. Many of them we helped through the pandemic apply for the payroll protection program and the EDIL. And we helped all these people who needed a director of finance, a chief financial officer, but they're a small business. They can't afford even half of one. So we designed our company to be fractional CFOs. So we do an hour for this company and 5 hours for that company and 20 for that one. And we're able to offer our depth of knowledge and network and strategy to small business owners all over, which has been great.
I love it. And I think it's great because obviously I work in the professional organizing space and I talk to professional organizers all day, like all the time. And one of the things I hear is for many of them, not all of them, but many of them is like, I've always been organized. I loved it. I used to color code my notebooks or my room or whatever. And, I'm listening to you and, your first job, like in hindsight, like it was always there. And if you look back at the trajectory of where you are now, like it all led to it. And I think it's so telling for anybody that is either in a small business or is thinking about, what should my next step be? Maybe you're a mom that was stay-at-home mom and your kids are getting older and you want to start something or whatever your story is, whatever your situation is. Think about the things that you're good at. Think about the things that you gravitate to, because I love this and that you didn't necessarily even connect the dots yourself this made sense. But then in hindsight, you're like, duh. Yeah. That would make sense.
Lori, I literally had a duh moment when I wanted to be a business owner for as long as I can remember. And I was like stirring on this entrepreneur itch and I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And one day it literally was like, oh my gosh, accounting. That's what you like to do. Duh, that's your product, right? I kept thinking I needed to have a thing that I liked to make or a cook and own a restaurant. It was just baked into my head that I had to have a product. And I realized my product was my knowledge. So
I love it. Yeah, it's true. We all have a tendency, present company included, to overcomplicate things sometimes,
yeah,
for real. But let's talk about the finances, because that is a hot button for a lot of people. And on this show, so for people who are longtime listeners, we've done episodes about personal finances and budgeting. And I think there's a lot there when it comes to also just parallels with, organization in and of itself and being organized with your personal finances. And there's going to be overlap with the professional and business, but there are going to be some nuances that are different. And I think as a small business owner, it can be really scary, at home, I have these bills to pay. I have to do this. Maybe you're doing a budget. Maybe you should be doing a budget, but whether you're doing one or not, but there's a different level of, I don't know, of just responsibility as a business owner that I feel with being dialed into my finances. And it can be overwhelming if you don't have that knowledge of even knowing what you should be looking at. What should I be doing? Maybe, like I should be dialed in, but I don't even know what I don't know. So I'm just wondering, first of all, why do you think that the finances are something that is so overwhelming for people?
Can you hear my dog barking?
I can, but it's okay. Occasionally my dog barks too, so don't worry about it.
I'm like, oh no, the dog won't. This is real life though, It is.
It's okay.
I really think that finances are a hot button for most people because it's really not been that long that many people talked about finances openly and honestly. And really, if you look back just a couple decades ago, it was really a silo of one person in the household who made the money and spent the money and gave allowances to their wives in order to go to the grocery store. I don't think that as a culture, we've completely allowed ourselves to be vulnerable to the idea that everybody struggles a little bit with money. I say a lot, I think everybody has interesting relationships with food and interesting relationships with money. And some of those relationships are positive and some are negative and some swing back and forth. And I sometimes find myself a little too comfortable talking about money for most people's comfort. I have no discomfort talking about money in any way, shape, or form. And I think a lot of that has to do that I started doing it at 16. I was counting bank vaults with hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash. I was cashing people's paychecks every Friday and seeing what their entire paycheck looked like. I was, seeing people's overdraft accounts. And for me, it just became normal. Monopoly money, if you will, in the case of the cash in the bank, you just start to get desensitized to it. But I don't think many people are desensitized to it. I think there's often shame around it, concern that they don't spend it right or that they don't know how. I think depending upon how you were raised, how your parents talked about money or didn't talk about money, it can definitely stir up some insecurity. So I think for that reason, many people feel very exposed. And it is something that I have to uncover with many of my clients because, some of them do want to talk personal finance and some of them only want to stick to business. And even getting into the business conversation, they can feel a little uncomfortable or nervous. So
it's funny that you say that because which I don't think but in my previous life, I was an executive recruiter for 15 years before I started Simply Be Organized. And so I've always talked to people about like, well, what do you make? What do you want to make? So finance, when I would talk to people, it came from a very objective perspective. It wasn't from a comparison. It wasn't like, how much are you making? It was more like, let's use these facts so that we can make decisions. Yeah. But there is so much emotion. And again, we've talked about this in the past. There's so much emotion that is tied to finances, just like there's emotion that's tied to so many other things. And so again, having that transparency to be able to look at it. And I think where a lot of people get hung up, and this comes back to level of organization, is you don't know if you're just taking everything and just kind of taking all your financial stuff and just shoving it in a closet, like that proverbial closet, and not looking at it. You don't even know what you have.
Yeah.
And so, or you don't know where it's going if you're not budgeting. And so what I want to do today is really just kind of unpack like some of the basic things that we could do, especially in our businesses, if you are a small business owner, that we can just be looking at. I mean, the fact, even just having you on, and I know I said it at the top of the show, you just gave just some overview, specific tips and actionable things that we can get to later in the show with our group. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is great. I didn't even know I should be looking at this. I didn't know I should be doing this, or I shouldn't be doing this. And there's a lot of nuances, and it can be overwhelming. So I think for a lot of people, when we don't know what to do, we don't do anything.
Yeah.
Right? Because we have this fear of making a mistake. So we're not doing the right things, not because we want to break the law or do something that's not, the way as buttoned up as it should be, but because we don't know. And so what I'm hoping is you can just peel back some of that fear and make it more simplistic and actionable for people.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that 2020 taught me, was just what you said. A lot of people will put all of their financial stuff into a closet and hope it organizes itself and hope that it makes sense of itself. I had several clients who unfortunately did not qualify for payroll protection program and EDIL loans and other type of government assistance through the pandemic because they had not filed their taxes for the first several years they were in business. And they kept saying, oh, well, I was operating at a loss. I didn't owe taxes. And it's like, but you need to acknowledge to the government that you're in business. P.S. You can take the loss when you own your own business against your personal, but recognizing that there's rules and there's rules for a reason. And if you don't follow those rules, you may not be entitled. Let's hope that there's never government funding like we had to deal with in 2020. But it's just a simple example of you're not going to be qualified for the things that maybe come your way if you don't follow the rules specifically.
Oh my God, file your taxes, people, file your taxes.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. And so many people didn't get the child credit, stuff, or just because they didn't do this, the rule that we all kind of know about living in the US. Now, so be it. The past is the past. But what I'm trying to help people understand today is that both from a professional and from a personal perspective, you have to know where you're spending your money. It doesn't matter how much you make. The top line is not, let me say it this way. I only look at my clients' top line, meaning their revenue, once I have a solid understanding that we've scrubbed the expenses, because debt is not an income problem. Debt is a spending problem. And if you don't know where all of those things come in, every single client I've worked with, when I start doing their bookkeeping, I will notice 2 to 3 subscriptions that they don't even know that they're paying for. It could be anything, like Audible starts charging them $13 a month because they bought one Audible book, or Experian. That's a really great one. I see Experian all the time. People check their credit report and it automatically dings them like $22 a month forever. Things like this are just really, really common. And I'm so over the top obsessed with my own personal finances and my business finances. I check my bank account every day just for that automation. It's not like in the old days where you would sit down and have a check register. Like, things get hit in your card every day. And if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss it.
And there's that level of intentionality that I think is really important with any area of organization, but specifically when it comes to finances. Yeah. And I know that is really a big thing. And I think even if you're not as, dialed in as you are doing it every day, at least I would say, I don't know, what would you, I'll let you recommend, like, what
once
would be
a week,
the rule?
minimum.
Right, once a week, looking at it.
Once a week minimum. There's several different angles of looking at finances. So cash flow is a big one. And cash flow is a complicated concept for some to understand, that to break it down, if you get paid in your paycheck every other week, but your mortgage comes out on the 1st and your electricity comes out on the 13th and your cable bill comes out on the 27th, and you have all these expenses that come out, you've somehow over time, hopefully, developed the pattern of cash flow in your mind. So you know when money comes in and kind of how much is going to come out when. And it's the same concept in your business. So you have to be able to project when your cash is going to come in and when your cash is going to go out and how to manage that. Now, obviously, the bigger your business, the more complicated your cash flow is going to be. But there's nothing worse than owing $1,000 with $500 in your checking account, knowing that you've got a $5,000 deposit coming in 2 weeks. Your cash flow is out of balance. So profit and cash flow are not the same thing. And they do confuse a lot of small business owners.
You know what? Can you unpack that a little bit for somebody? Like, let's just do a little lesson for people of what that distinction is and why it's important to be looking at each.
Yeah. So typically you're going to look at a profit and loss statement once a month is a pretty typical way to look at a P&L. And it's going to give you your monthly income, expenses, and give you a net profit, right? So income minus expenses equals net profit or loss. When you look at cash flow, you're going to be looking at the actual cash that comes in and out of your bank account every single month. Now, there's 2 different types of accounting for small businesses. It's cash basis and accrual basis. Cash basis is the more simple because it actually follows when your cash goes in and out of the bank account. Accrual basis is more accurate from when the service was provided. So, for example, you organize somebody's home and you do the work on December 31st. And you send them the invoice and they pay it January 2nd. In the accrual methodology, you would book that revenue December 31st. In the cash basis methodology, you would book it in January. So it really just depends upon, like, really the work happened in December, but the cash touched you in January. And it seems minor, but as those income numbers or expense numbers start to climb, it can really make or break your profit and loss for a calendar year, for a fiscal year, for a tax year. And it's important to understand how those 2 things go together. If you're a cash-based company, your cash flow is pretty simple because you're reporting your income and your expenses as the cash hits. But when you're accrual-based, it's a whole separate report that has to be monitored and managed. What if you can't make payroll because you didn't have enough earnings come in that week, or if you had to pay a big insurance bill, right? You need to know when those things are going to happen so that you can manage your cash flow appropriately. And I think of it the same way in my home, right?
Yeah,
like
I was going to say, obviously there's differences in the 2, but because you're not, I mean, I don't know, maybe you are running a P&L for your house, like what's coming in, what's going out. But,
I do.
Okay. So I don't, but what are some distinct differences? Because here's what I see. And I think a lot of our listeners that might be, and this is obviously, this episode isn't going to apply to everybody, right? So if you're not running a small business and you're getting a paycheck from somebody, obviously this is probably not something that you need to personally dial into. But for a lot of our listeners, they are trying to manage organizing their finances for their business. And that includes paying themselves. It may mean paying an employee or subcontractor. It may mean invoicing clients, whether it's for a good or a service, accepting payments. What is an acceptable payment, type? Obviously you and I have discussed this, but like can I accept Venmo? Can I not accept Venmo? How do I report everything? What should I be looking at? And it becomes so overwhelming because there's all of these different ways that we can exchange money. And how do we go from there? And I think for so many people, they think I have to do all of this, and maybe they're not in a position to hire a financial person to help them with it, to outsource that. So they're wearing that hat and they might not be skilled. So maybe just dial it back and hit some key points that are important for people that are listening that might be going, I don't know what to do.
You hit a button for me that Venmo, we've talked about this before. Even if you're talking about your personal finances, like I use Venmo pretty frequently. The problem with Venmo for businesses and quite honestly for personal behavior as well is that it sits into this universe of, it's almost like pretend money. People spend it more frivolously, which is why Venmo loves it. Using emojis somehow makes it not seem real. And I love that from a business perspective. I think Venmo's done a phenomenal job.
From a marketing perspective.
I mean, they've made it not. So when you teach financial literacy to children, you're supposed to give them cash and teach them the lesson of going to the store and handing over their dollar for the pack of Skittles. They're supposed to feel that they've left something in order to get something, right? That's part of like, they need to understand the transaction. Adults now primarily use card. In fact, I typically encourage people to use card because you can trace every penny, but it does take away that exchange happening. Now I have to put my card in a slot. Venmo's taken it a step further where now it's fun to spend money. Now I go in and like make little emojis and tell little stories, and it can get pretty tricky. So I don't love the idea. And I pick on Venmo, but they're all the same, right? Apple Pay, PayPal, Zelle. I mean, they're all by and large doing the same idea. They're making that electronic cash transfer between individuals happen. It's started to make its way into small businesses before legislation did. And what I'm seeing a lot right now is small businesses are using their personal Venmo account, which they pay no fees on, for their small business. And it's catching up with them. So what I mean by that is you took payment in 2020 through Venmo and you had some expenses. You reported your expenses, but not your income because it was on your personal account. Well, now Venmo is starting to send notification to the IRS, and all of a sudden that revenue is popping up and no one knows where it came from because it wasn't reported. My biggest advice to everybody is, if you have a small business, don't use a personal Venmo account. Build a business one, pay the fees, recognize the income. You will be in a world of hurt later when you pay fees and interest and fines for not reporting appropriately. And because it's electronic, they can go back for 10 years and look for it. It's the scariest thing I'm seeing today as an accountant is the use of this electronic funds from a personal account into the business. It's everything's traceable.
So if it is a business account, are you saying it is okay to use Venmo? It's essentially on the books. Is that what
Correct.
You're saying? So that is, so because again, in our line of work, and I typically don't, for the types of, work that I do with my consulting, I invoice people and I pay the fees. And again, I think for any small business owner, when it's not a hobby and it's a business, and you're the expert, but so correct me if I'm wrong, fees, obviously you want to reduce the amount, but there's a part of doing business. If you're going to accept credit cards or you're going to use a Square payment or Clover or any of these other things, there's going to be fees in exchange for the convenience of getting that immediate transaction.
100%.
And you have to obviously look at how much you're spending and want to be intentional and wise about it. But there's a cost of doing business. And I think for a lot of people, what I see, and I want to encourage people to just recognize and build that in, and then maybe look at how you're pricing. And that's a whole other conversation. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people go, well, I don't want to pay the fee, so I'm going to try to do a workaround. But not only is that illegal, but it also then makes the organization of tracking how much money did I bring in? How much did I really make? And then use that data to be smart about your projections. Really difficult. Is that accurate?
That's spot on, Lori. To save a couple bucks on fees, raise your prices 4%. It'll cover your credit card fees. It'll cover your Venmo fees. Your clients aren't going to freak out. It's 4%. And then you cannot worry about it. I mean, I use QuickBooks Online exclusively. It's my favorite accounting software. and I send my invoices through QuickBooks, and it's just part of what it is, right? You pay for the convenience and they're providing it to you. And everybody wants a slice of that pie. So it is part of how that goes.
We're going to take a quick break and then we're going to come back because I want to talk about something that it really struck out at me. And it's really about helping the small business person really trying to shift that mindset. Because I think that there's this connection with finances, especially with a lot of women business owners that I see, with really being able to charge appropriately and look at their business. And I just am curious from your perspective, what your take is on that. So we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back and talk about that. All right, Melissa. So I really, I'm passionate, for everybody that knows, not just about helping people organize their space, but really about organizing all aspects of their life. That's why this organized life isn't just about the closet. And financial organization, I think, is so important. I also think, especially in a personal setting, the more organized you are in your finances, the less physical clutter you have, because you're not spending as frivolously and you're being really dialed in. So I think that there's a lot of connection points between that. And I'm also very passionate about helping women entrepreneurs and giving them the tools to be organized in their business. So I think that I've seen a stigma with a lot of women when they're starting out in business. Mm-hmm. With how to charge, how to ask for payment, all of these things that can lead to all this emotional clutter, really. Yeah. And I'm just wondering if you could kind of speak into that.
Yeah, particularly around the space of asking for payment, I hear that a lot. And people get really uncomfortable reminding their clients that they owe them money or that they haven't yet paid the deposit. And one of my favorite things to recommend is have somebody, could be a bookkeeper, could be your spouse, could be your best friend, call and act like your accounting department. Because when you're the salesperson and the face of the business, it's important to maintain that relationship, and you don't want to seem like the accounting department. So it's oftentimes very nice to have somebody who's not afraid to call and say, excuse me, I'm Melissa from so-and-so's business. I work in the accounting department. We've noticed we've not received your payment yet. Can I take it from you over the phone? Versus the owner having to do that and potentially making the client uncomfortable. So if you're not comfortable in that space, have somebody help you and just make a quick phone call. You can also send an email pretending to be the accounting department. And that sometimes really does a lot of good as well. There are ways to ask for money without having to go completely out of your comfort zone until you're ready. And then you can find different ways to do that.
Yeah. And I know for anybody that does use an automated type of a payment processing, whether it's Square or QuickBooks or any of the number of online tools that are out there, you have the ability to set up payment reminders, which can remove that level of uncomfortable confrontation, for lack of a better word, and say, if you haven't gotten payment within a certain amount of time. I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of, is there a healthy amount? And I guess it might depend on your business. Like, what should your payment terms be? Like, should it be net 30? I normally do on payment, but like, at what point do you start sending reminders, or at what point does somebody say, we need to start accruing interest? For somebody that's a small business owner out there, do you have sort of a rule of thumb on that?
I do. If you are providing bulk items to a business, you can have them apply for credit, and then it's a net 30 situation, because they are essentially taking your product and not paying you for 30 days. You need to validate that they have good credit, and you can do that through Dun & Bradstreet. You can do that through references. You can do that a number of ways. But if you are not providing bulk, and I'm thinking like linens or t-shirts or food, anything like that you're going to supply to somebody in bulk, then maybe give them the net 30, but make sure you're doing credit checks. If you're not, I always say no more than net 5, meaning I give you the invoice today, you pay me within 5. 95% of the time for small businesses, it's due upon receipt. It's due today, the day of the service, beforehand, because if they're buying a service and they can't afford to pay you today, they need to be saying to you, hey, my cash flow is messed up. I'll be able to pay you in a couple of days. And you can have that individual conversation with that person, but don't assume that everybody needs it. Don't let them make money off your money. It's not the way that the cash flow should work.
Yeah, I think, but I've also talked to a lot of small business owners that get panicked if they send an invoice and it's not paid immediately. And I know sometimes people have, whether even with your personal finances, you might say, I pay my bills on Saturdays, or I pay my bills on the 1st or the 15th or whatever it is. And, that's why I have, I'm wondering, like, should there be like a little bit of a grace period? Should you be having a conversation with your customer before you're starting? How do you handle that? Because I feel like a lot of times communication is really the roadblock, because people think, back to our earlier conversation, that finances are this dirty little secret, or this is really uncomfortable, when it doesn't have to be. And just being very clear in your expectations, I think, can remove a lot of this fear the unknown. So I guess I'm just wondering, for people that are out there going, should I be saying, okay, so every Friday I'm like going to look at the outstanding bills, or we send a reminder if we haven't received payment within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
What are the best ways?
I'll tell you what I do for my own business. We bill our services on the 1st of every month. So typically around the 27th or 28th, I set up the invoices inside QuickBooks Online, and I send them to the clients that day with the due date of the 1st. So I'm essentially sending the invoices a few days before they need to pay it. I have 2 clients that pay it like before I can turn my computer off. It's like the moment they see the invoice, they pay it and they get it off their plate. The rest of them don't. The rest of them typically take till the 4th or 5th. And I do have a few who typically need to be reminded. Usually I can send a reminder invoice by email and don't have to have a conversation with them. But there are a few who just simply forget. They don't mean to forget. It's just, they've got so much going on in their own business that they don't remember to do so. I also have a very strong opinion that the small business should not be taking the person's credit card and charging it for them. You can get yourself into some really deep water. There's a lot of regulation around payment card industry. You've seen it in the news. Target gets blasted for being hacked. If you as a small business owner lose that credit card and it turns into some other fraud charges, like, you just don't want your hands in that pot. So
is that different than someone signing up for like the ACH, or you're saying don't have that for people? Because we also have a lot of people who have like membership. Oh, that's fine.
ACH is totally fine. It's the credit card. I just don't want your credit card information in my system, on a piece of paper, in my home, in my office. It's just a dangerous place to be. So if you're taking online payments, make sure that you have everything, because there are ways to capture credit card information so that it goes on repeat. Just make sure you have the security behind it to back you up. The last thing you want is to be hacked and then to be in the middle of a lawsuit for all of that. And it's very common these days. So it's not if, it's when, and it can be really ugly. But if I go back, so if I send the invoices around the 27th or the 28th, they're due on the 1st, typically around the 5th, I go back in and see who hasn't paid. I'll trigger another reminder, even though the system did it after day 3, I'll do it on day 5 myself. And then if I haven't seen it by the 7th, I usually text or call. Gotcha. And it's solved really fast. The problem can be if you let it linger and all of a sudden you're looking at your aging report and you have 60, 90, 120 day past due invoices, you're going to probably be writing some of that off.
Yeah, I think that that's really good because again, it can become uncomfortable for people, but being dialed into it and staying on top of it, which is another reason why I think it's really important that we look at our books, right? Just like look at the mail. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. You might not want to look at certain things, or you might not want to, or maybe you don't have an emotional reason why you don't want to look at it, but that comes back to calendar clutter and building that in. I think it's really important. And this is a point that I want to mention to people is if you're a small business owner and you are wearing the financial hat, you haven't outsourced that. I think it is really, really important to carve out time on your calendar on a recurring basis, build it in as a appointment, whether you're doing it weekly, whether you're doing it daily, but to say, I am going to on Friday mornings or Friday afternoons or Monday morning, whatever it is, this is the day that I'm going to invoice people or I'm going to double check, because if we don't, and we just go about our lives and we're busy billing clients, billing, and seeing clients, but we're not staying on top and dialed in, that's where things fall through the cracks.
Absolutely. And there's a reason the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? I mean, if you are following up and keeping like a regular cadence to make sure that the services or goods that you're producing are being paid for, you're going to have better street credit as a business. I mean, people will look at somebody who provided a service and didn't ask for an invoice and say, like, what kind of business are they running?
I have a friend of mine who shall remain nameless, but I'm like, can you please send me an invoice for your services? Like, why am I chasing you down for this? This is crazy.
Yeah.
And it's like some people just, I don't understand it, because to me, you're hiring my business to do a service. I'm going to give you this, and it's an exchange. I don't understand. Yeah. And there are people out there, and I'm not trying to say this to make people feel bad or to shame anybody, but again, I think making it the user experience really simple is also part of your obligation as a business owner. Yep. To make that customer journey simple, make it easy for people to pay, make it easy for people to, again, oh, I forgot. Like you said, we all, especially if you're sending an email, you're sending an invoice electronically, we get hundreds of emails a day. So there is a likelihood that it just got lost through the shuffle. So sending that reminder is okay. And sometimes, and I'll just say something, because occasionally it doesn't happen to me often. I'll just say, hey, pushing this to the top of your inbox. Yes. And 9 times out of 10, people go, oh my gosh, thanks. Yes, and that's all it is.
Yep, absolutely. And I do it. And I'm a finance person. I live in Arizona, so we have a pool, and I'm not going to take care of that pool. So we pay somebody to do it, and he will send me his monthly invoice. And like 4 days later, I'll be like, oh my gosh, I didn't pay it. I just forgot. And I pay it as soon as I remember. But not everybody is trying to avoid you, but don't let them accidentally ignore you or avoid you either.
Awesome. All right. So I want to ask you a couple of quick things about taxes, because at the time that we're dropping this episode, if you're listening to it live, it is in March. People are gathering taxes, but obviously people have extensions. They pay taxes all the time. So regardless of when you're listening to it, I think that this is going to be important. Can you give our listeners just a couple of things that they should be thinking about as they're trying to gather their documents to either pass over to their accountant, or if they're going to be filing their taxes themselves as that small business owner? Just a couple of, I mean, obviously there's a ton, but just a few really key points that people should be aware of.
Yeah, I'm like over the top with this stuff. I know. I have like a little checklist that is all the W-2 earnings that we have. So my husband has a job and I have a job. I have a 1099 miscellaneous that I get from a multi-level marketing thing. And then we have some income that comes in from a stock option that we exercised some time ago. So I know my 4 ins, and I have them on a checklist to make sure that I received the documents for those. Now, if you have any types of investments or other things that are going to bring you income. You just need to document what they are so that every year you know that you got the doc, because over time it can get really complicated to track all of the things that you're supposed to track. I also have that same thing for the expenses. So I track any medical, I track medical mileage as well as expenses. And a lot of it depends on your tax situation. If you're going to itemize or take the standard deductions. For my business, totally separate, but you're going to want to make sure you have all of your business taxes completed. Business taxes are done prior to personal taxes. And then just make sure that you have everything that you need. Like, I have 3 kids, so paying for childcare is still something very real in my life. Any items like this that need to be deducted, people often forget you can deduct the tax on your car registration, which is usually the majority of your your car registration. Just items that you don't want to forget over and over. And I just keep a simple manila folder, and I have the checklist every year, and it's sitting on my desk. And as I get the documents, I check it off. It saved me a lot of time over the years.
Oh my gosh. Do you have that checklist available for people to download?
Yeah, I can send it. It's my own personal one, but it can definitely be modified.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You need to put this on, you need to put this on 2 Cents Media, on 2 Cents Consulting, and have this as an opt-in.
You know, Lori, this is why I love you, because
I'm like, this is gold. Do you know how many people would download this? We would just get your email list up by like thousands of people just by downloading this, because that's gold. Perfect. People need
I'm going to do it. I'll do it today.
All right. Awesome. So by the time this goes live, we'll have the link to that, and we'll be in our show notes. So you can download Melissa's, tax organizing checklist.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. And we're going to put that in our show.
It definitely helps so much.
Because again, I think it's overwhelming for a lot of people and they don't know. And I think the more that you can, again, going back to this level of intentionality, keeping it simple and knowing what you need, knowing what's going to be rinse and repeat every year after year. Mm-hmm. And then what's going to change? Did we buy something? Did we sell something in your business? Did you add something new? Did you hire somebody new? There's going to be different things, but there's going to be certain staples that you're going to have. And so the more that you can start to develop these routines, the more seamless the process will be and less overwhelming.
You know, I got to say, one of the best things that I can advise people to do in January is get a very solid routine on how you hire people in your small business. So if you're hiring a contractor, do not pay them even a cent before you get a W-9 from them and put it into your system. 1099s are due January 31st. QuickBooks has a deadline of January 27th. If you had to go back this week, which I'm doing for some clients, unfortunately, going back in time to re-tag and find W-9s and get everything all put together, it makes that 1099 process, which should take 3 minutes, hours. So start a habit this year. If you're going to hire a contractor, somebody who owns an LLC, you're going to want to get that W-9 before you pay them.
That is great advice. Great advice. All right. So on that note, because there's so much more we could do, but I don't want everyone's head to explode, because again, this is a lot. It's a lot to absorb, but obviously Melissa has a ton of resources on her website. So this is the time. Let everyone know the best place they can find you, connect up with you. I believe you have an offering for our people. So
yeah, I do. Yeah. So we're on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, all at 2 Cents Consulting, and it's TWOSENSE. So like makes sense, 2 cents. A little play on words there. So 2 Cents Consulting, we have a website, www.2centsconsulting.com. And we really have 3 different offerings to people. One is for startups. You have no idea what you don't know. You just need somebody to help you figure it out. One that is a growing business. Maybe they need some bookkeeping support, some cleanup, a little bit more advice. And then the thriving businesses who really need CFO support, somebody to talk it out with, somebody to challenge some of the ways that they've been doing things and really dig into some better strategy. So three different types of options for people. One thing I'd love to offer your listeners, Lori, is our Be Your Own CFO course. We just launched it in December. It's been wildly popular. It makes me feel so good. But it's me, it's my voice talking and my picture in some cases. And we go through modules. The modules are about 5 to 8 minutes, depending. I wanted them to be bite-sized so that you could watch them again if you needed to. It's all online, self-paced. It includes 2 personal CFO calls. So with me or my partner, Leanne, and you get 2-hour sessions with us so that you're getting general knowledge, but then you can apply it to you specifically. And that's at 2centsconsulting.com/CFO course. And we have a special offer for your listeners is SBO22. It'll give you 22% off.
I love it. And we will have links to all of this in our show notes. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can, we'll have link up obviously over to the website. And obviously you can just access all of that there. So thank you for that very generous offer. I think it's super exciting. So yeah, whatever journey you're on, if you're doing it yourself and you're a DIYer and you just want some tips and strategies, definitely that's the way to go. If you're a little bit more sophisticated and you're going, want some strategy around the business stuff, I've tapped into Melissa's expertise myself. She's a wealth of knowledge, and that is why I'm sharing her with all of you. So thank you for all of this. We're going to take one more quick break, and then we are going to wrap things up with our rapid fire questions. So sit tight. All right, Melissa, you have made this process of financial organization very achievable. So thank you. I really appreciate it. I love when we have people on that can take the fear of the unknown out of it. So thank you for doing that for us. Okay. So, our show is all about honesty, authenticity. We always ask 3 questions to our guests. So the first one is more about inspiration. You obviously are a wealth of knowledge. What book is something that has really had an impact on your life, either something that you recommend to people, something that you refer back to yourself? Just give us a resource that that's made an impact. Yeah.
I love self-development type stuff. Love it. Like I'll read all of the things. I'd say Brené Brown is one who got me on the journey of loving these types of books. One that I'm reading today that I think is really awesome is The Joy of Missing Out, Tanya Dalton. And that's just the one that I'm listening to today. And it has me super motivated and loving it. So if you asked me last week or next week, I might change my mind, but today it's her.
I love it. Well, thank you. We will definitely link up to that. And then in this particular season of your life with 3 small kids, where do you feel, and this could be for your personal life or it could be in your business life, where do you feel the most organized and where do you feel like a little bit of a hot mess?
Let's see. In my home, I'm a very organized person. I live with 3 little monsters who are not the most organized, but I'm very good at delegating tasks in order to keep a clean space. So I would say in my home, I'm very organized. My most disorganized place of my life is my car. I have a minivan. I have 3 kids, baseball, volleyball, piano, Lucky Charms spilled all over the place. It doesn't seem to matter how many times a week the car gets washed. It just is a disaster. And there's no end in sight for me, Lori. I don't know. I think
every mom with little ones can relate to that. I don't miss those minivan Cheerios, Chick-fil-A, whatever.
I'm at this point where I'm like, so my youngest is about to be 7 and my others are 9 and 11. And I want to get out of the minivan. And then I'm like, it's kind of a lost cause for a while. I need to just stick it out.
Just embrace it. It is a sweet ride. So, oh my gosh. Well, Melissa, again, thank you for joining us. And for you out there, thank you for tuning in. I hope that you found value in this episode. If you know somebody who could benefit from this episode, make sure to share it with them. If you're new to our show, click the subscribe button or follow, whatever. And so that way you won't miss any other episodes and you can go back and listen to our 200 plus episodes that we've got. We're on YouTube and every podcast streaming platform out there. And if you prefer to read, we have a whole library of every single podcast episode on our website at Simply Be Organized. So any way that you want to consume our content, we make it easy for you. So until next week, I am Lori Palau. Peace out. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, please spread the love by sharing it with your friends. And if this is your first time tuning in, make sure to click the subscribe button wherever you are listening so that you never miss an episode. And while you're there, please leave us a review so other people know that our show is worth the listen. Head on over to YouTube and make sure that you follow us there as well. We record interviews, videos, and conversations with all of our guests. And again, if you want to learn more about our product offerings, feel free to visit us at simplybeorganized.com where you can connect with me.